In many major key progressions, and especially blues, the minor and major pentatonic scales can be used interchangeably. In this lesson, we're going to look at combining these two scales in a blues context. By marrying major and minor pentatonic, we can create phrases that say a lot more than if we just used one scale. Let's start with a minor pentatonic pattern we should all be familiar with. The audio clips you'll hear me play later on are the scale on the root of C at the 8th fret. But as you probably already know, the pattern is movable and you should be comfortable with playing it on different roots. Now let's superimpose major pentatonic onto that same root position so we can see where its tones lie in relation to minor pentatonic. Here I've grayed out the minor pentatonic tones that are not used in major pentatonic. As you can see, we've added the 2nd, 3rd and 6th intervals to the minor pentatonic pattern. The only intervals both scales share are the root and 5th. Now, a lot of guitarists like to extend this pattern slightly to increase the range of the scale. So let's first extend minor pentatonic. And now extending major pentatonic within the same area, that simply involves adding the major 3rd up top. So your first task is to ensure you can move smoothly between the two patterns without thinking too much about it. In the supplemental content for this lesson, I've included a useful exercise track that will test your ability to switch between the patterns at random intervals. I've also included some further extensions of this pattern so you can cover even more of the fretboard when you're ready. Once you're confident with moving between major and minor pentatonic smoothly, in a number of different keys, we can get to work on our phrasing and building our own licks. When looking at the merged scales, there are some key interchange points that will help blend the two scales more smoothly. It's not absolutely crucial to learn these, but they will help with voice leading, which is more about linear movements from one note to the next. Over the 1 chord, the minor 3rd tends to resolve up to the major 3rd, or down to the major 2nd. Over the 4 chord, the major 3rd tends to resolve up to the perfect 4th, or down to the minor 3rd. The minor 7th resolves down to the 6th. Over the 5 chord, the minor 7th resolves up to the major 7th, which we'll add in later, or down to the major 6th. The root resolves down to the major 7th. Using bends, slides, hammer-ons and pull-offs through these interchange points will help smooth out your transition between the major and minor pentatonic scales. A good exercise for now is to play through these interchange points over a blues backing track. You can find backing tracks on the lesson page for this video. However, don't feel you must always connect the two scales in this way. You'll want to combine these linear movements with more vertical melody. For example, over all chords in a blues progression, for something a bit edgier, try a minor 3rd, major 6th combo. Let's now play through a typical C major blues progression. In the lesson on soloing over blues changes, I emphasised the benefit of knowing where the chord tones of a typical blues progression would sit in relation to the scales you play. For example, over the 1 chord in major key blues, we're looking for the root, 3rd, 5th and minor 7th. These chord tones will be your safest, most common target notes for your phrases. They'll help maintain a sense of connection between your solo and the backing chords as you play through your scales. Our first example of transitioning between minor and major pentatonic over the one chord is to move from minor third to major third. For example, I might use the minor major third resolution to open a phrase leading to the root of the chord. There, I took the major pentatonic root through the major sixth, but you could also blend the sixth of major pentatonic and the minor seventh of minor pentatonic by using a bend as follows. The major second and minor third can also help blur the line between major and minor pentatonic. In that example, I bent the major second up to the minor third to smooth out the transition. A good tip when working on your phrasing is to try ideas across octaves. For example, here's how I might play the previous phrase an octave lower. Let's now move on to phrasing over the 4 chord. We can still use the same root scale pattern as it conveniently works over the 1, 4 and 5 chords in major key blues. However, you now need to be aware of the 4 chord tones to keep the scale connected to the music. One of the strongest target notes over that 4 chord is the minor seventh, which occurs naturally in the root minor pentatonic scale. You can see that the minor third of minor pentatonic becomes the minor seventh in relation to the 4 chord. However, now we need to be careful with the major third we used over the 1 chord, because it's not a natural 4 chord tone or extension. We can still use it, but it now functions best as a passing chromatic tone. That means we literally pass over it as part of the bridge towards a more resolved tone. Skipping to the 5th bar 4 chord, here's an example of targeting the chord's major third, or the 6th of major pentatonic. Moving back to the 1 chord in the 7th bar, another example of minor and major third interchange, followed by the root note to really strengthen that home chord resolution. Now to the first occurrence of the 5 chord. Again, we want to be aware of the chord tones that outline this chord within the scale pattern we're using. Now, there's a crucial tone for the 5 chord that's not covered by the major or minor pentatonic scales, and it's the major third of the 5 chord. In relation to the root scale we're using, that's the major 7th, since it occurs a half step down from the root. This 5 chord lick demonstrates how you can use the 5 chords arpeggio to lead into a phrase and strengthen its connection to the backing chord. Moving back down to the 4 chord, some double stop action, again mixing tones from both scales. Back to the 1 chord, with a slow bend up to the root, a natural resolution tone. And finally, the 12th bar or turnaround 5 chord, targeting the 4th of minor pentatonic, which translates to the minor 7th over the 5 chord, ready for a strong resolution back to the 1 chord. Now, it would be easy for me to give you 101 phrasing examples, but the more you explore interchange between major and minor pentatonic, the more you will internalize what sounds good and what doesn't. Also, remember there's nothing wrong with borrowing a few lick ideas and making them your own by using the knowledge you've hopefully gained in these lessons. Combining pre-rehearsed licks with improvised movements is a good way to go about it. Here's a quick summary of the key points we've covered. Make sure you're 100% confident with navigating the merged pentatonic patterns in several keys. To start with, I recommend E, G, A, and C, as these are the most common blues keys. Learn where the key interchange points are between minor and major pentatonic. There's a table to help you with this on the lesson page. Be aware of where the chord tones for each chord lie within the scale pattern and use them to outline your phrases and give them a strong destination. Practice creating your own major and minor licks over each chord. Of course, combining major and minor pentatonic isn't just for blues. You'll also predominantly hear it in country, rock, and jazz. In a non-blues context, you'll find it works best over the one chord in major key progressions. Don't forget to head over to the lesson page for tabs, diagrams, backing tracks, and other supplemental content. See the link in the description. Cheers.
Thank you.